Welcome to LiveDaf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom Aleichem, welcome back to today's Daf, KEREISOS Daf Yud. We begin on Talmud Bavli. Perhaps let's just back up to the Mishnah again to give us a complete picture of the Sugya. So the Mishnah back on Talmud Bavli is around 12 lines from the bottom. Here's another example of one covering the many. One carbon covering multiple births. We're talking about the carbon that a woman offers after childbirth, whether it's a viable child or even a hapala, a miscarriage, lo. Says the Mishnah, a woman who gave birth many times. For example, so just a quick overview of the halachas of the KEREISOS, which is discussed in the Chumash, beginning of Parshas Tazria. If an Isha gives birth to a Zachar, the first 7 days following that birth are called Yimei Tumah. She has the status of Tumah, regardless of whether or not she sees any dam. That is followed by 33 days, which are called Yimei Tahara, after which it's called V'mlois Hayamim Ha'ela, when these days fill, when they complete, full count. So by a Zachar, until 40 days, she's still considered within the realm of that birthing experience, after which, on day 41, she brings a karban, a keves as an oila, a bird as a chatos. If she can't afford, she brings a pair of birds, one for chatos, one for oila, and she's back, able to access karbanos fully to her. Of course, we're talking that she was tayvel as well. Now, by a nekeva, it doubles. It's an 80-day process. So 2 weeks immediately following the Leda, she's experiencing the Yimei Tumah. So that's 14 days, followed by 66 additional Yimei Tahara. So even if she sees Dam, she's Tahar, until day 80 including, after which on day 81 she brings a Karbanos. Says the Mishnah, let's say, V'ipila b'tech shmoinim. She gave birth to an Akeva, which extends for 80 days, right? And she reconceived. So after the 2 weeks of Tumah, she was Toivel and she reconceived with her husband. Now she had another miscarriage. So the first one could have been a viable child. Now it's a miscarriage, and it was actually an akeva. It was formed to the extent that you could discern the gender. So this triggers another 80-day count. Then once again, she discharged a nafel within the 80 days, and this too was an akeva, and it goes on and on. So it's a recurring, repetitious, multiple birth experience. Halacha is, she need not bring a special carbon per experience. One carbon at the very end covers it all. Another example would be, let's say she conceived multiple fetuses at once, twins, triplets, and then she birthed each one at a separate time, with time intervals in between. Now here Rashi points out, it could be even Zachar, who have a shorter count, because she doesn't have to reconceive. In order to reconceive, you have to have more time to work with, to be table, to be with her husband, right? So you have to have 80 days to work with. But here, she conceived all at once. The births were done at intervals. So a Zachar today, a Zachar, and a week from now, etc. All of them are covered under the same carbon. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, he disagrees slightly. He says, you can cover under the same carbon, but Mevi al Rishon. You see, the Rabbanan will hold that the carbon addresses the very last experience, and that covers everything that happened prior, if it was all sort of overlapping within each other's time zone, right? According to Rabbi Yehuda, no, it's the first birthing experience which triggers the obligation, and anything that was enveloped within it. So if it's an akeva, anything that happened within the following 80 days is covered. But anything past 80 days of the first birth is a separate experience, despite being within 80 days of the second birth. It's not a chain link. It's not an ongoing, recurring, connected system. No. She's obligated to bring carbon for number one, But not on number 2, which occurred within 80 days of number 1. It's enveloped within it, it's absorbed within it. But then when it comes to number 3, which was beyond 80 of number 1, a separate carbon for that, despite having occurred within 80 of number 2, because number 2 is not a player. The carbon is on account of number 1 and anything enveloped within it. So number 3, which is beyond number 1, requires a carbon. But then again, number 4, which was enveloped within number 3, is pater from a carbon. Because the carbon on number 3 addresses it and anything within its time frame, including number 4. Okay, so in a nutshell, theoretically, an Isha can cover many leidos with one carbon, as we're going to see in the Gemara based on a pasuk. So let's say she had multiple births. According to the Chachamim, one covers it all, provided they're all sort of linked with each other. Number 2 occurring within the first countdown, number 3 occurring within the second countdown, etc., etc. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the chiyuv is for the first, and anything absorbed within its 80 days by the nekeva or 40 days by the zachar, but past the first 80 days or the first 40 days, anything that happens past that point is chayiv a new carbon. Minalan. How do we know that many can be covered under the same carbon? Tanitanu comment Rav Sheshes. A chacham presents a brayso to Rav Sheshes. Zois teiras. Teiras is an expansive term. It covers the many. Zois teiras hayeledis l'zochar nekeva. Malamed we learn shemivia a carbon echad al vades. However, one carbon could cover many velades. Says the Gemara, Yachal af ala leida balaziva. Let's say she gave birth and she's also a zava, she's a dam, and she requires a carbon. Could be covered all under the same carbon. Tamulayma zois teiras hayeledis. Each experience needs its own. Now, why is it even up for consideration? Many Leda is okay, it's pretty much the same type of experience, but Leda is one trigger and Ziva is a totally different trigger. Why would you cover it under the same umbrella? Perhaps one carbon could cover Leda and Ziva. Why? If that's the case, imagine she ate dam, which has its own obligation. And V'yolda, she gives birth as well. Chanami, here too, you're going to suggest De'en Mevia Ela Carbon Echad, one carbon could suffice for both? Why? Of course not. So why would Leida and Ziva go together? We have to revise the Brisa. What the Brisa was considering was Yachal Ala Leida Shalofnei Melois. So until now we spoke about one carbon covering it all, provided the recurring Leida is happened within the preceding Leida's time frame, right? So within 80. But let's say the next birth happened beyond the Melois. Melois is the fill of days, meaning the completion of that count. Suppose she hadn't yet gotten around to bringing a carbon, and she has a new miscarriage or birth. Can be covered? No. Perhaps she can use the same carbon to cover a Leida that happened before the completion of the count, and also to address a birth that happened after the completion of the count. Perhaps since she hadn't yet brought a carbon, she can just tie it all together. Zois teiras hayeledis. It's a new experience. It's beyond the time frame of the previous one. It's its own experience. It has to be addressed independently. So once again we have this machlekes. Rabbanan say, no matter how many times, as long as they're all sort of linked and overlapping, you bring for the last and it covers anything prior. According to Rabbi Yehuda, no, it's the first birthing experience which triggers, and it also covers anything that's absorbed within its account. It's like batal, becomes like secondary to the initial primary birthing. But if she goes on later to have another one, and that occurred beyond 80 of the first, she's having a new carbon. So what's the how do we understand this machlekes? If you will, to understand and to explain, we can suggest as follows. The divrei of Yehuda, according to him, Vlad Rishon Goyim, it's the first child that triggers the obligation. So you bring in the carbon for number 1. And you count from number 1. Anything within its 80 days is included, but anything past 80 days of number 1 is out. According to Chacham, it's the opposite. It's the second, the last one, that triggers the obligation. And we ignore anything that happened prior to that. That becomes secondary to the final one. Rashi even says you don't bring a carbon for the first one. You bring just to the last and final one. That's sort of the end, the completion of the experiences. And that's what triggers a carbon. You count from the second one, from the next one. Meaning that it's just an ongoing, recurring linkage system until you get to the very last one. So if they're all overlapping, just keep on going until the very last one. You bring a carbon for that, and you're exempt from the rest. You have to theorize this. Of course, this must be the pshat. There's no other way to explain this. The point was to highlight the second case in the Mishnah where she had conceived multiples and then discharged them separately. No, maybe that's a bit different. Maybe since they're all rooted in the same conception, perhaps even Rabbi Yehuda would agree. That's all one, continuous experience. And just bring for the last and final one, and it covers everything. Perhaps I can say. In that case, Rabbi Yehuda agrees to Rabbanon. Kamash from the point is no. In all situations, they both stick to their positions. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's the first Leda that triggers it. And anything absorbed within it, fine, but anything beyond the first Leda is its own experience. According to Rabbanon, what triggers the Chiv is the last and final experience, and everything else becomes exempt. Now, this was regarding carbon. Let's zero in on Rabbi Yehuda's position. What is Rabbi Yehuda's position? So we have one, let's give the numbers, right? 1, 2, 3, and 4 births. 1, and then we have a second one within 80 days by Nikeva. Says Rabbi Yehuda, fine. That one's included, but number 3, which is within 80 of the second, beyond 80 of the first, gets its own carbon. So that's regarding carbon. So we reckon with the first, we sort of ignore the second one, which is sort of absorbed in the first, and it doesn't sort of trigger its own count with respect to absorbing another one afterwards. It's all sort of enveloped in the first one. The first one is the carbon obligation, and that covers anything absorbed within itself, but not beyond it. So in a sense, we sort of ignore the second birth. It becomes sort of secondary and tuffle, bottle to the first one. Okay, so that's regarding carbon. What about the counting of the days? After birthing, she counts her Yimei Tumah. By in the cave, it's 2 weeks, 14 days, followed by 66 Yimei Tahara. What happens in this case if number 2 occurred within the 80 of the first? So Rashi learns, of course, it gets its own count. You can't totally ignore him. You have to give him 2 weeks of Tumah, and ultimately another 60 days of Tahara. So she's going to count 2 sets of 80. The question is, what happens to the counting of the first, which you're in the middle of? You're in the middle of the Yimei Tahara, the first, and boom, there's another Leda. Is that first Leda so powerful, so overriding, so overwhelming, so primary that it just keeps on playing in the background, despite the fact that now she had a new birth and this new Yimei Tumah? We say it's like 2 tracks happening at once. She's observing the Yimei Tumah for the second Leda, but still, it doesn't stop the clock on the first Leda. So in the background, we have a countdown of Yimei Tahara. Despite the fact that she can't really experience Yimei Tahara, she's tummy because of the second Leda. Do we look at it like that? So basically, she loses out to Yimei Tahara because she's doing 2 counts at once. She's observing Yimei Tumah for number 2 and still counting down Yimei Tahara. Or do we say no? It puts a pause, a temporary halt on the countdown of the Yimei Tahara of number 1 until she completes the Yimei Tumah of number 2, and then she goes back and resumes counting Yimei Tahara of number 1 until she finishes, and then she counts the Yimei Tahara of number 2 as well. So the question was posed like this. We turn to the next element. B'tumah mali amar Rabbi Yehuda. What's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion regarding the Yimei Tumah of number 2? Does it put a temporary pause on the Yimei Tahara of number 1 and she could make up for lost time afterwards? Or no? She loses Yimei Tahara as she's counting the Yimei Tumah of number 2. Shall we say, Mi Amrin, Ad Kan Leka Amar Rabbi Yehuda, V'lad Sheini Kamad Lesser Dami? Perhaps. When does Rabbi Yehuda completely ignore the second birth? Elinin carbon regarding not requiring a new carbon for number 2. It's enveloped in number 1. Why? Kivan the Layatza Shah Shru'i Alak carbon. Fact is, she hadn't yet left the realm of the first Leda. She hasn't yet arrived at a point where she has to bring a carbon. It's still within the 80 days. Because of that, V'lad Sheini Kimad Lesedami, regarding carbonis, number 2 is ignored. He's enveloped in number 1. Aval, regarding counting days of Tumah Tahara, perhaps here it shifts. Perhaps regarding this factor, we will reckon with the second one. Look, the second one arrives, Malatav. There's Yimei Tumah. Okay, put a temporary hold on the initial count until you're done Yimei Tumah, and then go back to the initial count. Don't lose out because of the Yimei Tumah. Don't have the Yimei Tahara count down as you're having Yimei Tumah of number 2. Come on, this is done. We have to reckon with the second birth. And the Yimei Tumah of the number 2 will now interrupt, stop, pause the Yimei Tahara of number 1, which had already started counting. Umamale. Yimei Tahara the Rishon. And when he's done the Yimei Tumah of number 2, he'll go back and complete a full count of Yimei Tahara of the first. V'hadar Mayne, Yimei Tahara the Shein. And then when he's done, he goes over and completes the Yimei Tahara of number 2. That's one way to look at it. So she doesn't lose any Yimei Tahara. Oidum, on the other hand, no. The Rabbi Yehuda Chumru Islay. When Rabbi Yehuda ignores a second, it's to generate a chumrah stringency, because by sort of considering number 2 as merely subordinate number 1, not giving it its own, status, ultimately number 3, the third birth will have to have his own carbon, despite having occurred within the Yimei Melois number 2. We ignore number 2 regarding the carbon of number 3. So regarding chumrah, Rabbi Yehuda sort of ignores the second one. Avalacha, regarding our question, if we will posit that the Yimei Tumah of number 2 merely put a temporary hold on the count of number 1, it's going to be a leniency, because you're going to make up for lost time. Kula, it's a kula. The kula less, he doesn't hold it a kula. He will hold that it's all about chumrah here. Not only do we count out the full count of the second one, but as we're counting it, the first one is still playing in the background, and he loses out. Yimei Tahara. So which way is it? Okay, so again, in a nutshell, we have number 1, we have number 2 within 80 of number 1. You have to observe full count for number 2 as well. So you're starting Yimei Tumah. What happens to the Yimei Tahara of number 1, which had already begun counting? Do you pause it and then resume it later so you don't lose any time? Or does it keep on playing in the background? Amar Rav Huna Meisura Tashmai brings a raya. We have a brayso regarding carbon Pesach. So you let us, okay, our topic. What happens to this woman? Shoichen v'zarken aleha b'yom arba'im. So when she's tummy, she can't be available for the carbon Pesach, but if it's already day 40, le-zachar, 40 for the zachar, or over Yom Shemaim Nekeva, day 80 for the Nekeva, so pretty much at the finish line, we can bring a carbon on her behalf, and she'll have it tonight on Pesach. Ask the Gemara, what do you mean? On day 40? On day 80? She's still short, because let's remember, she still needs to bring karbanis. She's mechusa kapara, lacking that completion of her purification process. So although she was already tayvel way back and she finished her 80 days, but until tomorrow she's still presumably ineligible for a carbon Pesach. She's mechusa kapara. Ad katmei, she still has an element of residual tumah on her until she brings the karbanis tomorrow. Let me explain to you what's going on. It's more complex than you think. She had multiple births. So she had a boy. And the next day, she had the twin boy. So she's sort of running 2 tracks at the same time. So day 41 of the first birth is still day 40 on the second birth. And that's what we're talking about. And we're going like Rabbi Yehuda, that we ignore the second count. We focus only on the first birth. That's the primary birth. That's what is central to her experience. So despite the fact that it's only day 40 from number 2, who cares? As long as it's day 41 from the first birth, which is full count. She can bring a karbanos today, she's done. V'amar Chizda, Hamani Rabbi Yehudi. We are following Rabbi Yehuda. The Amar tells us Vlad Sheni Kamad Lesedam. You ignore the second Vlad. So she's day 41 from the first Vlad. She's good to go. Oh, now we can derive from here some clarity regarding our question that was posed a couple of minutes ago. How do we run this count? V'amrus betumo svirally. The Rabbi Yehuda Vlad Sheni Kamad Isidami. Now, if we'll say that according to Rabbi Yehuda, regarding matters of tumah, regarding matters of counting, we reckon with number 2. And he puts a pause, a hold, on the count of number 1. And then we have to make up for lost time. So here, we have to add another day. Because the count from the first Leda was interrupted by the second Leda, which occurred a day later. So you lost a day. You have to make up that lost day. How could you shecht a Karban Pesach on our behalf on day 40 of the second Leda? Despite the fact that it's already day 41 of the first Leda. But no. Since the second Leda occurred a day later, so that extended the Yimei Tumah a day further. And on that extra day of Yimei Tumah, which expanded past the Yimei Tumah of the first Leda, she was supposed to count Yimei Tahara of the first Leda. And she couldn't do that yet. She had to wait. Because it puts a hold, puts a stop on that first count. So you have to make up for that lost day. So you really have to wait an extra day. To wait until day 42 of that first Leda. So tonight, 41 at night, she can't have the Karban Pesach. She must wait until day 42 and bring Karbanos. Doesn't that prove to us Rabbi Yehuda's opinion regarding counting, the Tahara Tumah regarding counting the Tahara Tumah severely holds Rabbi Yehuda Vlad Sheni Kamad Lesedam. We ignore the second Vlad. And since it's already day 41 of the first Vlad, we don't care what happened in the middle. And we just kept on counting for that first Vlad. And since it's day 41, she's eligible for bringing her Karbanos and have a Karban Pesach brought on her behalf. So that pretty much confirms that that is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. So as the Gemara, no. Perhaps I can go like this. Lo tumah tahara, svir le Rabbi Yehuda, tevla sheini k'man de'isedami. That perhaps Rabbi Yehuda goes with the other approach, that regarding counting days of tumah tahara, the second birth, is k'man de'isedami. We have to reckon with him. And yes, he will put a pause on the first count, which will have to be resumed later. As per your question, aren't we short a day? This price is talking about a unique situation, a circumstance where Klal Yisrael is tummy, and they're bringing the Karban Pesach despite the fact that they're tummy. They're allowed to. And she's included as well, despite the fact that she has Tumas Yoledis. Hold it, says the Gemara. That's only an allowance by Tumas Meis. Partake in the Karban Pesach when she's tummy by Mishnah, Pesach Tumah, even a Pesach which is offered in a situation of Tumah, only specific type of Tumah. All these individuals who have personal Tumahs, they can't partake. Only one who touched a mace. Yeah, that Mishnah which disallowed the Yoledes is when she hadn't yet immersed in the mikveh. So she's still connected to her birthing experience. But in our case, Kitana, that Bryce is talking about the Shechtim Zerkan Le'adar Tavla. We're talking about that she already was Taival. That's she gave birth to a Zachar. Once you made Tumah up, she's Taival. She's called like a Tvulas Yayim. It's like a person who immersed and is still waiting for sunset. She has to wait for the very long, extended sunset, so to speak, until the 40 days are up, and then the next day she brings her karbanis. But once she was toivel, she sort of purified herself, disengaged from the tumas leda. So even though she's still partially, ineligible, she has to bring the karbanis. But for that we allow her access if it's a time when everybody's coming anyways. Pesach Baba Tumah. Yochi says, if that's the case, if you're giving her free passage because of the Tumah circumstance that's prevalent in Klal Yisrael at that point, then why even wait till day 40? As soon as you made Tumah and Tefillah are done, she's good to go. Mishminid lo lechazi, from day 8 she's okay. Mishminid lo lechazi, she's not okay from day 8. Kasavar tful yam dezav kazav damik. The fact is she's still a tful yam, like we said before. And we're going like the opinion that when a person is still in the status of tful yam, he's awaiting the completion of the day, of the sunset. Here it's a 40-day completion. He's still considered like a zav. In the case of a zav, a man who had an emission and he's tamei and he had a mikveh, so until he has the full and complete hair of shemesh, he still has an element of zav to him, which is a personal tumah, which doesn't allow him access to the Korban Pesach, even when it's ba b'tumah, because that's unique for tumas meis. Likewise, by a woman who yeledes, when she's a tefillah yayim, she's still considered somewhat of a yeledes until she's done her count, and at that point she's only mechusar kippurim, and she's allowed access in this type of circumstance. Yachi. Well, if we're not allowing her access to the Korban Pesach because she's still not done, so even on day 40, she's not technically done. She has to bring her karbanis on the next day. Lie. Actually, yes, she's fit on day 40, despite not having yet brought her karbanis. Because this ton of the Bryce will hold, lacking karbanis. No, you haven't yet completed your full purification process, but you can't say that I'm still, identifying with the original tumah, the ziva, or the yeledes, kasava, mechusa, kippurim, dezav, lav, kasav, dami. That if you're only lacking karbanis, you're not linked to your original tumah. There is something that has to be completed, but you're not labeled as a zav anymore, since you're already immersed in a mikvah, you had hair of shemesh, send you yeledes. According to Rava, has a different opinion. He says, if you haven't completed, you're still connected to the original tumah. So if she hadn't brought her karbanis, she's classified as yeledes. Has he explained the brayso, which gives her access to Korban Pesach prior to karbanis? Here comes another teretz. Okay, so we had this kasha from the brayso where the yeledes on day 40 can access the Korban Pesach. We thought it was a riot to our discussion regarding the counting process. We sort of negated that. We moved on. That we're talking about the time of Tumah, and she's allowed despite not having her karbanis taken care of, but that didn't work according to Rava. Rava Ashi. Rava Matarsla, who learned the brayso differently. We're not talking about a proper yeledes on day 40 of the Leda. No, when we spoke about 40 and 80, it's as follows. 40 days since conception. B'yoyim araboyim l'yitziras zachar. Or b'yoyim shmoyim l'yitziras nekeva. Bryce is just pointing out she discharges a miscarriage, and it was calculated to have occurred on day 40 since conception by a boy, or on day 80 of the nekeva's conception. It's not yet formed to the extent that it has halachic validity regarding the tumas leda. It's not considered a ledas. It's still premature to the point that it's not a leda. That's all the Bryce is saying. There was no leda. It's too early in the process. Rabbi Shmuel, we're going like this. Shita Dama, who says l'zachar it's arba'im ve'echad. He's formed at day 41, and prior to that, he's not considered developed to trigger a tumas leda. And the keva, it takes a bit longer. Shmoyim ve'echad 81. So if Saib asks the Gemara, okay, so it's not a valid birth, but what about the blood that she saw? It makes her a nida. Teipik leda himisham nida. B'ledi vashta, with a dry birth without any dam. If that's the case, then it's such an obvious halacha. Why even discuss it? There's no leda, there's no nida. What's the issue? Well, the time perhaps there's room to think. It's an expression. You can't have the opening of the womb laid down without blood. It's impossible. Come on from the point is yes, it is possible. Not common or likely, but it's possible. The efshar of sichas hakever laid down. So that's the point of the brayso. Don't worry about anything. There's no leda because it's too early in the game, and there's no nida because there's no dam. So again, we had this big question. multiple births, covered under one carbon. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's the first light that triggers the carbon and covers anything enveloped within it. So anything that occurred within the 80 days of the nekeva, covered. What about the Tumah Tahara count? Does that second birth put a temporary pause on the first count, in which case she'll make up the lost days later, or not? Does the first birth just take over and just keep on sort of playing in the background, and she'll lose out because of the Yimei Tumah, which is sort of coinciding, interfering with the Yimei Tahara? That was the question. We thought we had a raya, we had 3 years to explain, and we haven't yet really concluded on that. Here comes another attempt. Amar Shmaya Toshma, listen to this raya. We have a braysa focusing on the pasuk that in the nekeva triggers 2 weeks of tumah and 66 days of yimei tahara. V'shishim yayim v'sheshes yamim teishav al yimei tahara. Shishim yachol bein ritzufin. How do you count the 60? Perhaps bein ritzufin, whether it's consecutive, it works without any birthing experiences to interfere. Bein fuzan, or even if they're dispersed and fragmented, interspersed by birthing or miscarriage experiences. Can you do that? Can you sort of combine together fragmented days? Talmud Leimar. V'shishim yayim, ma'yim ratav. Just like the day is one entity, there's no dividing the day. There it's Tamei Torah. V'shishim kulam ritzufin. Likewise, the 60-day count has to be a consecutive, uninterrupted count. So basically, suppose she began counting Yimei Tahara and was interrupted with a new Leda. That original count just keeps on going. There's no, well, we'll stop, we'll go back to it and make up for lost time. No, that's fragmented. It has to be consecutive, uninterrupted. So we pretty much have clarity on our question. But the question is, who's speaking? Is it Rabbi Yehuda the Rabbanan? Very important. Mani, who's the author of this? Who are we going like? Ilema Rabbanan? Are we following the Rabbanan? This whole thing is not relevant according to the Rabbanan. Because according to them, we only reckon with the last and final birth. We ignore everything else. There's no interfering and interruptions. It's always going to be consecutive as per the last birth. Ilema Rabbanan, mi islu Rabbanan fuzan. Do they even consider an option of dispersed and fragmented? It's not relevant to them. El alav Rabbi Yehudi. The only option is Rabbi Yehuda speaking. No. The fact is that it requires consecutive, uninterrupted days. So we have clarity in our question. That he only disagrees with the Rabbanan in a chumrah. That we sort of ignore the second birth. We consider it part of the first experience with respect to the fact that the third birth that happens afterwards within the second birth's time is considered a separate entity. But not to say that we ignore the number 2 with respect to making up for the lost time of the Yimei Tahara of number 1. No. The Yimei Tahara just keep on going, despite the fact that there is a new birth. And the Yimei Tumah of the new birth eats away from the Yimei Tahara of the first birth. Because you can't combine fragmented sections of the 60 days. Oh, Shmami, no, that confirms that in fact, Chumrah Islay the Rabbi Yehuda Kula Laslay. Regarding that original question, yes, of course, Rabbi Yehuda ignores the second birth regarding generating a Chumrah, so that the third birth is chayiv a new carbon despite occurring within the 80 days of the second birth. New independent experience, because the second birth is sort of enveloped in the first, doesn't have its own standing. But regarding counting Yimei Tumah of Tahara, regarding our question, we do reckon with the second birth, which means to say that despite the fact that it happened within the 80 days of the first birth, we give him Yimei Tumah, and that Yimei Tumah interferes. We can ignore it, it interferes. which means to say that as we're counting the Meitumah of the second one, the first Leida's count is still, clock is still ticking. And ultimately she'll lose out because she's missing some Yemei Tahara due to the Meitumah of the second one. So basically, we seem to have clarity here on our question. Could she make up for lost time? No. The second birth is reckoned, which means to say that the fact that she had another birth, which triggers a Meitumah count, will deduct, will be the expense of the Meitar of the first one, which is still playing in the background. Because it has to be Ritzufim. It has to be consecutive. So the count continues. Loi says the more Lo'ilim Rabbanani. Perhaps this price is going like the Rabbanah, not like Rabbi Yehuda. As per your question, when do Rabbanan even allow a fragmented? They just reckon with the last and final birth. There's no count that was interrupted. We're speaking about a unique case, where even the Rabbanan would agree has an element of fragmentation. We're speaking, let's say, the second birth, and its ensuing count was all absorbed within the first count. So let's say she had an Akeva, which is an 80-day experience, and she gave birth to a Zachar in the middle, and the 40 days of that second birth of that Zachar will complete it within the 80 days of the first. So in that case, even the Rabbanan agree, you go back to the first and finish its count. When do they say we just focus on the last, on the second or the third? That's when the experience of the second or third extends past the time frame of the previous birth. So we just focus on the last one. But if it's fully absorbed within the original experience, in that case, of course, we can't ignore the first experience, and we have to resume its count. And that's what the Rice is talking about. We're speaking she gave birth to an Akeva, which triggers an 80-day count, and she had a Zachar somewhere in the middle there. And the 40 days of the Zachar are fully over within the 80 days of the Akeva. So she has to go back and finish the count of the first Leda. Now the question is, could she make up for lost time? Could she compensate? Add more day of Tahara to compensate for the Meitumah of the Zachar? The answer is no. It has to be consecutive. And that's the point of the price. So again, it's on Rabbanah, it's on Rabbi Yehuda. But perhaps according to Rabbi Yehuda, you wouldn't say that. You would say that you can make up for lost time. Saif says, hold it, your calculation won't work. Because Shalman Yoimei de Kadma, Va'adkan de Barsor Shalman, it's impossible to have an added birth, fully absorbed with all its count, with all its days within the 80 days. Because look, she had an Akeva. For 2 weeks she's off. She's tummy. Then she's table. At the earliest, you can see it at that point, which is already day 14. Now, you need a minimum of 40 days for it to be reckoned as a Vlad, has to have that 40-day development, right? So we're holding at 54 already. Right? And how many days left till you're 80? Only 26. You need 40. 40 days for the counting of the Zachar. The Rabbanan of Vlad Sheni Monu. So in this case, with the 40 days of Zachar extend past the 80 days of Nekeva, of course you just ignore the first one, just count on the second one. So again, there's no concept of fragmentation and resuming old counts. You just ignore what happened till now, you start fresh, and it's a straightforward, consecutive, uninterrupted count. So the Brisa cannot be talking about the Rabbanan's opinion. I'll tell you how it could work even according to Rabbanan. That there's an element of fragmentation. But you'll this time, instead of speaking about an Akeva followed by a new conception of a Zachar, no. She had conceived twins at once, and she discharged them at separate times. So then you can have it. First an Akeva, which triggers an 80-day count, and then followed, a couple of days later, whatever, by a Zachar, which has a shorter count. And so it happens that the Zachar's 40-day count will conclude before the 80 days of Nekeva concludes. So it's fully absorbed within it and requires us to go back and complete the 80 days of Nekeva. The question is, do you make up for lost time or not? And that's what the Bryce is saying, you don't. I'm going to what happened was, for instance, the second boy, the Zachar, was born on day 20 of the Tahara of the Nekeva. Just an example. The Moed Minkat Le Shivi Meituma Delay. So now she has to first observe the 7 days of Tumah for the boy. And technically the 40 days are over while still within the 80-day time zone of the first one. The Bryce is addressing this case. Perhaps in this case where she's giving birth to twins and one is fully enveloped in the other. That was the first in the Nekeva, which triggers an 80-day count, and then followed by a Zachar soon after, whose count will be completed within the 80 days of the Nekeva. So what happens to the Yimei Tahara of the Nekeva? To just pause for a moment, to allow the Tumah of the Zachar to take over, and then go back and make up for lost time. And then we'll give her a full 66-day count, even though it's fragmented, dispersed, before the birth of the Zachar. After Yom means consecutive, uninterrupted. Mayim kulei ratzuf, ashishim kulam ratzufim. A day is consecutive, one entity. Likewise, the 60 is one entity, consecutive, uninterrupted, despite the fact that there was 7 days of tumah because of the Zachar. We don't care. The Yimei Tahara of the Nekeva is still playing in the background, and the countdown continues. Okay, so we thought we had a raya. Well, it was somewhat of a raya, but not on Rabbi Yehuda's sheet, on the Rabbanan sheet. We came with a unique case. Even according to Rabbanan, we'll have to fragment it. We'll have to count based on the first Leda, despite being followed by another one, because it was fully absorbed within the 80 days. The point of the Bryce is you can't fragment it. So you don't make up for lost time. Let's try another attempt at clarifying Rabbi Yehuda's position. So now we shift to the pasuk of 33. That's by the Zachar, 7 days, followed by 33 day Tahara. And it reads like this: Shloishim Yoyim, Shloishis Yamim. So Shloishim, 30, does that mean uninterrupted or even fragmented, pieced together? Shloishim Yochel Bein Ritzufin, Bein Psalm, perhaps consecutive or fragmented. Tamlam Yoyim, Shloishim Yoyim, Mayim Kulam Ratzav has to be one entity. Of Shloishim Kulam Ritzufin, one entity. Again, who's speaking? Mani. Ilam and Rabbanan is the Rabbanan speaking. We turn to the Amud Beis. Mufuzar. With the Rabbanan, even have an option of dispersed and fragmented. Now in this case we can't, in this passage we can't suggest the previous scenario of the multiple births within each other, because here we're talking about a shortened time period. We're talking about a boy who only has 40 days to work with. So you can't possibly have a second Leda fully enveloped within the first 40 days. Right? Again, because it's a boy. Only has 40 days. So if a week later she has another boy, which triggers another 40-day count, that's going to go past the first 40 days. So you don't have that option at all. So according to Rabban, there's no option to even discuss fragmentation, dispersions, because you just ignore the first one, you focus on the second one. Rabban already told us, money which count based on the second one. There's no piecing together, there's no simultaneous tracks happening, just the second one, that's it. Allah Rabbi Yehudi. This must be Rabbi Yehuda speaking. And that proves our point. That in fact, according to Rabbi Yehuda, even though he says that the first Leda is what triggers everything, the carbon and everything, it's only regarding Chumrah. Because it results in a chumrah that the third birth gets its own carbon, because we sort of don't give the second birth status, because he was sort of enveloped in the first one. But to say that we totally ignore the second one, even regarding making up for lost time, no, that's a kula. That will give her extra Yimei Tahara. No, in this case we reckon with the second Leda, which means to say that the Yimei Tumah of the second Leda will take a bite out of the Yimei Tahara of the first Leda. You can't go back and make up for lost time. You can't fragment the 60 days and piece it together. It keeps on playing in the background, and she'll lose out for the Yimei Tumah of the Zachar that happened within the 40 days of the first Zachar. Another raya to the same point, Tashma v'sheshes yamim. So the pasuk says about in the cave, it's 60 days. Shishim yom v'sheshes yom. So what happens if there was something within the last 6 days, 66? What happens if there was a discharge within the 6 final days? V'sheshes yom, yochel ben rutzufan ben fazar, perhaps you can count them consecutive or dispersed. So if something happened in between, we sort of put a pause on the 6 days and we resume later, we make up for lost time? No. Talmud Lema, the pasuk says v'shishim yoim, which is consecutive as we explained, followed by v'sheshes yom. We compare notes. Talmud Lema shishim, ma shishim kol mutzufan, just like 60, it's fully consecutive, uninterrupted. Af shisha kol mutzufan, likewise the 6 days consecutive, and you don't make up for lost time. You can't put a pause and come back to it. Again, mamni ilim rabbanon. Who's speaking? Is it the rabbanon? Yislu rabbanon fuzar? Do they even hold of an option of dispersing? I mean, we're talking about the last 6 days, right? So once you're holding there, if something happens, a new later, we just focus on the new one. We ignore the previous counts. There's no going back concept at all. Rabbanan told us Vlad Sheni Mani. We count based on the last and final Vlad. So this concept doesn't apply to them. El Rabbi Yehuda, you must be Rabbi Yehuda speaking. Who reckons based on the first one? And the point of the Brisa is that we can't make up for lost time. Shmamino Chumra Isle Kula Leslie Shmamino. Apparently Rabbi Yehuda is only arguing regarding generating a Chumra, additional karbanos. On that we say we ignore the second birth, and the third birth is its own thing, new carbon. But regarding a Kula generating a leniency, to say that we sort of ignore the second birth and it's Yimei Tumah, to the point that we can make up for lost time and give the first birth additionally made tahara instead? No. So actually, according to him, the first birth is sort of playing in the background despite the new arrival, despite the fact that you're counting Yimei Tumah for the second birth, and the clock keeps on ticking on the first birth as well. Shmamina. Okay, so in conclusion, multiple births going to be covered under the same carbon. We have a pasuk Zois Torah say Ledis, one for many. According to Rabbanan, one birth on a keva, which triggers an 80-day count. A second birth within that 80 days. Third birth within the 80 days of the second one. On and on and on. It's all sort of linked and overlapping, and you bring a carbon for the last one, you count for the last one, and you're done for everything. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's actually the first Leda that gives her a status of a Yeledis, and that's what the carbon is about. And that's what you're counting about. Now, if there's another birth that happens within the 80 days of the first, it becomes secondary to the first one. Now, according to Rashi, of course, you give it its own count. That's it. Because that's also sort of extending her blackout period from Karban. It's also a Chumrah. But regarding the question of what do we do with the Yimei Tahara of the first one, should you already be done counting by the time the second one came along? Can I make up for lost time? Can I say, well, now I'm having Yimei Tumah, the second one, but I can still make up for these days. So when I'm done, I'll go back to the Yimei Tahara of the first one, make up for lost time. No, we don't do that. The clock keeps on ticking, and she ends up having to expend the Yimei Tahara because of the new Leda. Continues the Mishnah. Elu, there is a Gersa Chamisha, 5 individuals in total. Mevin carbon oil. They'll bring a unique carbon, a fluid carbon, a fluctuating carbon, depending on financial abilities. It could be either option 1, which is an animal carbon, option 2, a bird carbon, option 3, even a mincha. What are these 5? So the first one on the list, al shmiyas koil, listening to a voice. So a fellow denied by way of an oath his ability to assist through his testimony in his friend's trial. Turns out that he was misrepresenting the truth, he was lying, and he admitted as such. He needs to bring a carbon. What kind of carbon? Well, because a sign person transgresses with a false oath regarding other matters. Well, Tumas Miglish Ugdashav, he got involved with the Beis HaMikdash or the Kachim materials while he was Tamei. Back to home. Although we have 3 options, 1 is the animal, 2 are the birds, 3 is the mincha, but not everybody's given those 3 options. Some only have 2 out of 3. Tanur Rabbanon, yesh maybe bedalos v'ashiras. In some cases, you only have option 1 and 2. Ashiras is the wealthy option, and dalos is one below that, somewhat poor option. Yesh maybe bedalos. In some cases, you bring dalus. V'yesh mevi b'dali dalus. This is a girsa that switches it a bit. V'yesh mevi b'dalus u'v'dali dalus. So in some cases, you have all three options. You can bring the dalus, which is option 2, and dali dalus, which is the lowest option as well. As follows. Yoledis only has option 1 or 2. Maybe a b'dalus v'ashiras, bird or an animal. Mitzera, maybe b'dalus, mitzera as well. Only has those two options. Shmiyas hakoil, however, uvitis vasaim, however, v'tumas milush gdoshav, however, maybe in b'dalus, b'dali dalus. They have all three options. Tanidach. We have another brisa, which puts it into numbers. Yesh maybe echad tachas echad. There's one who will bring 1 per 1. So 1 instead of 1. We'll see soon what this means. Yesh maybe shnayim tachas shnayim in some cases. 2 instead of 2. Yesh maybe shnayim, some bring 2 tachas echad instead of 1. Yesh maybe echad tachas shnayim. In some cases it's 1 instead of 2. And the brisa concludes, Mekanat halamid, from here you confirm, la asira sa'ifa bepruta. That if one is holding by bringing in a mincha, which is a tenth of an ephah, it could even be worth just a pruta, that little, that inexpensive, and you can still fulfill your obligation. Later we'll see how we get to this number. Now the Gemara explains the formula in the brisa. Yoledis mevia achas tachas achas. By yoledis, if she drops to option 2, the bird, it's only 1 per 1. Preda achas to tachas keves. Instead of the sheep for the oila, she'll bring just 1 bird. So it's not a pair of birds, it's just 1 in place of the 1 animal. Mitzera, by him it's 2 for 2. Shtei prayed 2 birds, 1 chatas, 1 oila, tachas shnei kvasim, instead of 2 sheep. So it's 2 in place of 2. Shmias koil, uvitas vasayim, v'tumas miglik dasha, last 3 on the list, they'll bring 2 in the place of 1. Meviyan shtei prayed, they'll bring 2 birds, 1 chatas, 1 oila, tachas kivsach, instead of that 1 sheep. And on these 3, Umavian Bedali Dalos, Asir Se'eva, they have the third option as well, the Mincha, Tachash De Braden, in lieu of the 2 birds. So you can have 1 instead of 1, 1 instead of 2, 2 instead of 1, and 2 instead of 2. Katani. Now the brisa concluded regarding the price of a Mincha. Even a Pruta works. Mekanat Alamid, Asir Se'eva, Shiva Pruta. How do you get to that amount? Minola. How do we know? Tanarapa. So it's going to be based on a relative formula. What is the comparative ratio in terms of cost between option 1, which drops down to option 2, the animal to the birds, and likewise we'll apply the same ratio, same proportion, same formula to confirm the difference in value, the drop in price between option 2, the bird, and option 3, the mincha, which will end up being a pruta. Minol. So how do we know this? Tanarabba. However, alai. A person pledges a carbon which costs a sum. He didn't say what type of animal. Maybe keves, he brings a sheep, which is presumed to be worth a selah. Why? Keves is the only animal that's worth a selah. Mimai, how do we know that a keves animal is meant to be worth a selah? Sits down a price. The ram for the yasham, which is in the 2nd year, so it's a year older than the keves, which is in its 1st year from birth, is worth 2 b'kasev shkolim, 2 selah. Okay, so a sheep, which is half the age, half the value, goes for 1. M'chlal, the keves ben shana b'selah. Apparently a keves, which is 1 year, is meant to cost a selah. Midachsiv. How do we know a keves is 1 year old? Keves ben shnasai. It's within the 1st year of its birth. Utanan. We've established the price of the top option. Keves equals a selah. A selah has 4 dinar. Now, how much are the birds valued at? So we had that Mishnah a while ago. The lowest it ever went to was a pair of birds for a quarter of a dinar, which is really a 16th of a selah, the value of a keves. Turns out that a pair of birds is a 16th, 1 in 16 of the animal. So option 2 drops down by 16, and we assume option 3 as well. The mincha vis-a-vis the birds. That's how you get to a pruta tanan. That day the birds dropped, a pair of birds worth a quarter of a dinar, which is 16th of the selah. From what we see that the Torah had compassion, that option 2 is merely 1/16 of option 1. The Mavi Chad Mishis Asar. Chad Mishis Asar Bashir is 1/16 of the highest. Let's assume we apply the same exact formula going down to the third option. So option 3 will be a 16th of option 2 in terms of price. Kachas Rachman Torah had Rachmanas on the poorest. Chad Mishis Asar Badal to be a 16th of the level above it. Ask the Gemara, but you can end up with not 1 pruta, 3 actually. How? Imkain, if that's the case, dalos kamahavi river. We established that option 2, dalos, is a quarter of a dinar. Let's break it down to pennies, the prutas. It's 48. The kama prita, how many prutas are you going to find in the quarter of a dinar? Arbar mitmani priti, 48. What's the 16th of 48? 3. Way more than 1 pruta. Chad mishis asar b'dalos kamahavi. How much is the 16th of that dalos? Tlos a priti, 3. Oktani, the Brisa said, 1 pruta for the mincha. Mekanat alam b'lasir sefer pruta. Amai, why is it just 1? Amai pruta. Ha'amras asir sefer dali dalasu. You told me that the asir sefer, the mincha, is the lowest, poorest of the poor. Option 3. But Amras, you tell me it's a 16th of option 2. Chad mishis srei. The dalas was the 16th of option 2. Well, if you'll work it out, the numbers point to 3 pruta on the mincha. Chashvinish lasa pritiha. The answer is like this. No, let's work with a smaller ratio, 1 in 32. 1 pot in 32. Why? Because instead of working with the comparison of 2 birds versus a keves, so 2 birds will be a quarter of a dinar, which is a 16th of the keves. No, look at the yoledes, who brings just 1 bird. 1 bird is an 1/8 of a dinar, which is how much of a sela, which is 4 dinar? 1 pot in 32. So you drop down 32 times. Tanam Yoledis Yolav, going to the Yoledis, the Masi Preda Achas Tachas, she offers just 1 bird instead of the animal, the Havichad Blossom Train Kevis, which is 1 in 32 of the Kevis. Okay, so now if you take that same formula and adopt it to the next level, you drop down again 32 times. So it ends up being a pruta. Actually, the more we'll ask, it ends up being 3/4 of a pruta, because the bird is valued at an 1/8 of a dinar, which is 24 prutas. And if you take that down to 1 pot 32, it's 3/4 of a pruta. We'll get to that soon. Ask the Gemara, hold it, but is that fair to establish the value of the third option based on the proportional cost of the second option vis-a-vis the first, which is 1 pot 32 by Yoledis? Well, actually, guess what? Yoledis doesn't even have the third option. It doesn't have a mincha option. So how could you derive anything regarding the definition of the third option from Yoledis where it doesn't even exist? Now, until now, Dali Dalas Kamahava. How much is the shear of Dali Dalas the lowest? Chad Mishis Badalas, really, fairly, it should be a 1/16th, not a 1/32, because Yoledis doesn't have that option. The Meichayolov Mekeves Va'il, that detail, the value of the third option has to be learned from situations where they have that third option. The Meichil of Mekeves Va'il, that's going to be learned from the other fellows who bring the other karbanas, Ketumas Mikdash Gadasha, Vaishvua. So if you can't work with the 1 and 32, you got to go with the 1 and 16. Adkan Prutu Palgahavi. So it ends up being 1.5. Basically, we have to learn this system in 2 stages. One is difference in cost between option 1 and option 2, the animal and the bird. That you can go to Yoledis, 1 pot 32. But to determine the value of option 3 vis-a-vis option 2, you got to go to a person who has that option, where we only find a drop of 1/16th. Right? Because in those cases, it's 2 birds coming off of 1 animal. 2 birds are only a 16th of the animal. So if you take the value of the single bird, a 32nd of the animal, which is learned from Yoledis, which is really 24 prutas, and now you move over to the other system, the 1 and 16 system, you end up with 1.5 pruta. Oh, Marava, no, not a problem. Let's go to Yoledis all the way. The differential between option 1 and 2 is 132, and likewise between 2 and 3 is 1 pot 32. If everything is learned from Yoledis, the value of option 2 and option 3. The Brisa means the fact that we find by Yeledes, Torah has compassion, allows a drastic drop between option 1 and option 2. By Yeledes we find that the single bird is merely 1 part in 32 of the animal. Let's adopt that formula going forward as well and determine the cost of option 3 accordingly. Hachi Chas Rachman Alei Dal Torah had the same attitude, same approach to the poorest, to determine it as 1 part in 32 of the level above it. So it's 24 prutas divided into 32. Oh, it's less than a pruta. Yochid Nechei. Deduct riva a quarter. The pruta, it's a quarter below a pruta, because 24 divided by 32 is 3/4. You're right. Technically, you can bring a mincha worth merely 3/4. It's not proper. It's not derech. It's not honorable. To bring such a low value gift to Hashem, so it's pegged by at least a pruta. Okay, in conclusion, we have 5 individuals who have a carbon of yered in various formations. But in general, we have 3 options. 1 is the animal, 2 is the bird, 3 is the mincha. Some bring option 1 or 2, some have all 3 options. In terms of value, we work with a 1 part in 32 proportion. And just as the bird by the Yeledes can be 1 part of 32 to the cost of the animal, likewise, the fellows who bring the mincha can bring that cheap of a mincha, but it should be at least a prut. Let's just recap the first sugya as well. You have Zoyis teaching that 1 carbon could cover many birthing experiences. We have different approaches, the Rabbanah's approaches, that it's the last and final Leda which triggers the Chiyav, and we ignore everything prior, if it happened overlapping sequences. Whereas according to Rabbi Yehuda, that's the first Leda that triggers the Chiyav and covers anything within its Yimei Malays, but anything past that point has its own status. What about counting Yimei Tumah v'Tahara? So we came out to the according to Rabbanan. Typically, it's not an issue because you only count based on the last one. But in a case, this is an exceptional case where you have the second Leda totally embedded within the 80 days of the first one. In that case, you have to resume counting the first one as well. But you don't make up for lost time in terms of making up for the Yimei Tahara, which was lost on the Yimei Tumah of the second one. And likewise, according to Rabbi Yehuda, where in general you adopt that approach. You count for both experiences. So you start counting for the first one, then you move on to the second Leda and count accordingly, but you don't make up for lost time. You consider the second Leda as something of substance to the point that you can't just ignore him. You can't just make up for the Yimei Tumah. The fact is, they counted as Yimei Tumah for the second one. You lost time on that. That was the conclusion of the sugya. Okay, all the best to you. Hatzlacha.